Hi, this is Sherry Kruger. I'm a member of the Michigan World Organization of China Painters and the chapter Michigan China Painting Teachers Association. What I'd like to do today is share with you a technique where you use live leaves or leaves from plants that and use them to stamp and give you a background. What I'm going to show you before we get going is a couple examples of that. And what happens is when you use the live leaves, it actually gives you some of this interesting texture that you couldn't paint. You couldn't paint it nearly irregularly enough to make it look natural. The second piece I'm showing you is also of geraniums, and it's just a smaller piece. And again, using the leaves to create that background shape. And then the third piece I'm going to show you is actually just the stamped leaves before they are painted or the subject is painted on them. The reason I think geranium leaves work well is they have a pretty dominant veining system in the on the underside. And so what we're going to do is paint on the underside and pick that up. So when you're choosing your leaves, try to choose some of varying sizes. I'm going to have kind of this flower come up from here, and then we've got this nice leaf over here. So, we're getting directions going. When I am picking off the leaf, you can see where there's the stem here. And I cut that stem off, and I've been using my fingernails, but we'll use palette knife there, as flush with the base of the leaf as I can. Um, and maybe that leaf could come from behind. So that would kind of give me my structure. Um, so I'm going to set that aside. I can, if you're not sure you're going to remember where you got those, you can kind of um, use your pen to just, kind of create a rough outline around them. So there you can see where I'm going with my three leaves. So a leaf, a leaf, a leaf, and a leaf. I'm going to set that aside. So when I'm doing stamping, similar to pen work, you don't want to use a dark green. I find if you go with like a shading green or a um, black green or blackish green or any of those real dark green, um, the paint actually fires darker than it appears when it's not fired, similar to pen work, as I said. So I will go with a medium value green. In this case, it's just kind of an autumn or a brown green. And then I'm going to use some balsam of Copaiba. You can use any medium that if you're using an oil base, if you use something that dries, right? Because you don't want to um, have it run for you. If you're using a water-based medium, then you can, and it's a drying medium, you would actually be able to do two fires, well, not two fires, two coats in the same step. So there's you can see it's kind of drippy, or it runs a little bit, not quite as thin as ink, but pretty thin. So I'm going to set that aside, close up my oil. And so I'm going to start with the smallest leaf first, only because then I can keep the piece in front of me without having to worry about getting my hands in it. You can use a sponge. I happen to like to use a brush because it lets me get a little oil on my brush, and then I can also kind of make sure I get it on both sides of the veins. Where, with a sponge, I don't want to beat the leaf up too much. So I'm just going to hold it down and start painting on it. I'm doing it against a napkin. You could do it against a towel. You could do it against your work surface, but then you'd have to clean up afterwards, and I don't want to do that. So as you paint this, all you're looking for is a light coat. You don't want to build up of paint. It's not a matter of how much you get on, because it will release pretty easily. You really just want to capture all the surfaces so that it creates that texture that I showed you on the tile. So once I have this kind of painted everywhere, I'll try and show it to you. It's just got this light coat of paint. If I like down here, because I really like picking up where all those veins connect, I'll make sure I have paint there. And then I'm going to move everything back in front of me. Now I'm having my stems come this way. The hardest part is you make an absolute mess. So just get prepared to have paint everywhere. I'm going to remove my L so we won't. And I'm going to lay my leaf down. Now I put a finger where that veining is, and then I just start patting around, trying to get my fingers out of the way so you can see. Paying a special attention to those outside edges because I like the scalping that's on a geranium leaf. If you do this with a friend, it's kind of fun because you can reuse the leaves. And then I pick it up. And when you pick it up, you want to be careful to not slide it. So I'm going to move this up so you can see that perhaps a bit clearer. And that's it. Now you can see this little area right there. I don't really like that. It's a little too smushy. I don't know what the right word is. Whatever word. I don't know. So you can wipe off part of that. And then I'm just going to kind of, like, I know where my center of my leaf is. So I'm just going to reapply using only part of the leaf. And again, you can see it picked up. So it's a pretty forgiving method. I suspect the biggest risk would be if you get it too heavy, because you don't want it to run, which is why I recommend using a drying medium. You can use an open medium. You just have the potential for running or the increased risk of running. So now we would move into a second leaf. And again, it's the same thing. Now this is kind of a full leaf. So again, I'm going to do the whole background, and I'm just, again, I'm kind of brushing, gently scrubbing. The brush I'm using is a very soft, flexible bristle, so it doesn't beat up the leaf too much. If you had a stiffer bristle, you just want to be a little more careful as you're applying it. And it's kind of fun as you're working your design to aim for a whole leaf, a little leaf, a big leaf, as much variety as you can. So again, I'm going to, if you remember, I have this area that I want this leaf. So I'm going to lay it down and hold it with my middle finger. No, it's not. That's my index finger. That's probably better too, right? And I don't know if any of you are basketball fans, but try not to travel. Once you've put that leaf down. Now you can see, I'm going to see if I can get a little, I'm going to lift it up. There's a ruffle there. Now, if I go this way, it's going to push that leaf that way. If I go that way. So I'm just going to kind of fold it and pretend it's not there. And again, trying to make sure I get those outside edges down so that I have that scalping that, in this method looks so very natural. And now I'm going to pick it up and set it aside. And you can see that leaf. And if you remember, right, that fold was right here, but it's really, you can't tell where it is. The other thing you can do is, can you see this leaf that is a partial fold, or, is folded in half? So you're only seeing part of the leaf. What you can do to accomplish that is fold that. I'm going to do it with a smaller one. So I think I'm going to, if you're going to do multiple stamping with the same leaf, you might just want to brush over it quickly with the brush. What I can do is just lift up that leaf and place it down. And then what you can do is just kind of shape that leaf so it gives you that nice arch. You can also go in with a pointer. Um, and create that. So you can use a pointer if, like over here where I added some extra, or I wiped off part and restamped. I didn't think the edge was that nice, so I can just add that edge to that. If you have, like over here, if you can see the area where there is no stamping, you can just kind of bounce around real gently with your brush, and it will do that. So you can manipulate some of this. Like down here, you could take where there's a buildup of paint, you could gently kind of just pat on it, right? Because you don't want anything to chip off. That would be a bummer. And that's the technique. Once I have got my leaves stamped on, I can then paint in my floral design and stems and fire it. And then I'm going to demonstrate the second fire on the leaves now. So these leaves I did previously, and, we'll pretend I've got some flowers on here. It's not really doesn't. So on my palette, I have 3 values of green, a chartreuse, medium value, grass green, I think it is, and then a shading green. I also have violet of iron. I think if I was doing red geraniums, it would be fun to paint with I think they're called bullseye. And I'll demonstrate one because they do turn out really pretty. So like always, you're going to start with your leaves underneath. So I'm going to go into my darkest green and set up under this leaf, trying to capture as much as I can of that variegated border, that or scalped border that is there. Um, So, this is the leaf that's furthest back. So I want it to not have a lot of detail, I guess. One of the things I like to do, if you look at a geranium leaf, this is one that doesn't, once you've put paint on the back of them, they get pretty limp. You can see that it dimples in where the stem had been attached to that. And so how you can get that to appear that way is if you go into your darkest value, I'm using a shading green, and just kind of go around that, trying to get dark on the outside. So I have a side load on my brush. And it creates that deeper divot where the stem would have been attached to that. Because this one is under this, I'm actually going to carry this dark color all the way to the outside edge a little bit because it would stop your eye from leaving the piece and just makes it a little more interesting. I can do kind of the same thing over there. And again, just, geranium leaves have quite a lot of texture and variation in those leaves. They're not a real flat, stiff leaf like a pathos or something like that. So it's fun to play with those. If I want to enhance that dark spot over there on the edge, I can come in with my chartreuse and it at this point looks like a fold in the leaf. So let's do this one, and I'm going to do it as if it is that bullseye that has kind of that violet of iron band in it. So I'm going to start with my medium value green and just capture those outside edges. I think one of the fun things about using stamps or leaves to do these stamps is you don't really need to put a lot of variety in what you're painting because you have so much texture and interest in what is left behind from the stamping of that leaf. Um, so I think it makes it really attractive and not something that you can typically do yourself and get a natural looking leaf. If you try, at least for myself, if I try to do that, I end up with a very contrived look. Now this leaf goes under that leaf a little bit. Then I'm going to, again, similar to what we did here, I'm going to put a dark area right there where the stem would be attached to this leaf. Now, sometimes what happens is the two sides, and I can show you on this. See how this side of the leaf actually overlaps the other side. I'm trying to get that in there. So you can see they don't have that V that some of them have. So you don't always have to have that leaf open all the way to where the stem attaches, but you would want to then set that portion of the leaf to look like it is under or over, depending on which section you're doing, the other one. So to do that, you would just want to take that paint away, create, and you could come under here. Could use your wipeout tool to accomplish the same thing if you want a stronger look. So that's how I would paint these leaves, just really accenting the interesting stamp that is left behind by your first fire. As I mentioned, this one I would like to do as a bullseye geranium, and I think the violet of iron creates that look really well. Now what I'm doing is blending that out just a little so it's not a real harsh start and stop. But you want to be careful. Red and green are opposite each other on the color wheel, so if you blend them too much, you end up with a gray. So it's really just a gentle little teasing of those two colors together. So there's kind of that bullseye look I was mentioning for the geraniums that have that. I know my grandma, that was the one she had. I'm just going to accent that in a little further. So this big fellow, he's just, it's just fun to do. The other thing you can do if you knew that you were going to paint whatever color geranium you were going to paint, you could bring that color into the leaf a little bit, either as, if you want to think of it as a reflected color, or just, it just adds a pretty interest. So again, you can do multiple fires. Again, you want to be careful when you do that first stamping that you don't get the paint on so thick that it pops on you, which it can do. Now, because this leaf is on top of the other leaf, I want to go into my chartreuse. So I'm going to come back to this area, but I'll come over here and finish this. And then, as I mentioned, I like to give that appearance of kind of that dimple where the stem is attached to that. So I'm going in with a shading green. I happen to have a pretty blue shading green, which I like. It's not quite as stark as like some of the more black colors. You can also, if you want, put some of this color in other areas to create the ruffles. So this is my demonstration of using leaves to stamp. Again, as I mentioned, if you have any questions, and if there's something else going on that I can help with this kind of project, please let me know. I would be more than willing to share what information I have. So hopefully you'll take a chance and play with it. Have a great day. Bye-bye.